Hello and welcome along to Clare FM's Sideline View Review. Derek Lynch with you on this Monday evening. On the agenda this week, we'll review Clare's loss to Offaly in the Tailteann Cup. We'll look ahead to the Minors showdown with Kerry. We'll preview the Munster U20 hurling final, and we'll wrap up another busy weekend of local soccer. Football is the first port of call though, where Clare's first foray into the Tailteann Cup ended with defeat to Offaly by 117 to 114 in Zimmer Park, Kissogue. We will talk to Joe Garry and Kieran Madigan about the game in a moment, but first let's get the thoughts of banner boss Paul Madden. He's been speaking with Clare FM's Sid O'Connor.
It certainly was a competition we're looking forward to in the context that it was a competitive All-Ireland championship. So, you go into every game looking to win still, and we just played poorly today. We played really poorly today. We never really got going. We had so many bad shots that either came short or wide in the first and second half. I think we had the guts of 20 overall, and I'm including into the keeper's hands there. You're not going to win any game with that. You're not going to win a challenge game with that. In a competitive game, you're certainly not going to win it. And it just never got going for us for whatever reasons. And I'll take responsibility for that as the manager, but very disappointing.
There was 26 minutes gone there in the first half when Conor Meany was down injured, and just to fill a gap, we just decided to know what was running through your head at that particular stage. Offaly were in the lead, I think it was 8 points to 3 at that particular time. So all throughout that first half, you could see the Clare was trying to get a grip back into form that we saw against Kerry.
Yeah, well, I am quick to point out that we lost the game against Kerry too. I know they're the All-Ireland champions, but moral victories are no good to us, in the context of trying to get results. But in the context of performances, I suppose, look, for the most part, we were very well structured. We seemed to be really moving with pace and intent. That's a word we use a lot. We didn't seem to have that intent today, for whatever reason, which we'll have to reflect on. But I think when you start missing shots that you would normally score, or you start taking wides or taking the wrong option, it does have a knock-on effect on the team, and it does add to the flatness then.
Okay, 9 points to 4 at half time. We came towering back into the game, and we put ourselves in a very good position early in that second half. It slipped from there.
Yeah, and I suppose that's frustrating because we had no right really to be back in the game per se based on our first half performance. But we have been scoring this year, and I know I've mentioned a lot of wides. We have been scoring in games, so we always backed ourselves. And the one thing we said was there would be no panic at half time. 5 points, there was a strong breeze there. We had some good kickers of the ball on the pitch, so we just said that we wouldn't panic. And then when we got the goal, which is a great finish by Cormac, which is capable of, and then we knocked down a 2-pointer as well. And we were ahead then for the first time. And I'm sure the Offaly guys were probably thinking, how have these guys got ahead? Because Offaly probably were pound for pound better overall to that point. But, at 53 minutes gone, we were ahead. And we just let them up the field for a very soft goal. I think from an error, I can't remember fully, but I think from a turnover or an error or a claim for free that we didn't get. But, and I'm saying that in the context that it wasn't a free, but we were claiming for it.
Yeah.
And they went up the pitch. I think it was from that.
Yeah.
And they worked a good goal, and suddenly all the hard work that we done the first 17 minutes was wiped out. But we're still in the game, and it was kind of tit for tat a bit then after that. Yeah. And then they just slightly pulled away at the end. Yeah. And maybe we tired.
Now you heard the views there of Clare manager Paul Madden after the game on Saturday in Zimmer Park, Kissogue, and we know from this lunchtime then that it'll be back there again for the round 2B clash when Longford will come to town. And from memory, I think that was an All-Ireland qualifier back around 2015 or thereabouts that didn't go Clare's way on the day, so hopefully we can reverse that one. Before we look ahead though, let's reflect with Joe Garry and Kieran Madigan on that game. And Joe, I suppose the words flat and lethargic have been used quite a bit from the couple of people we've been speaking to about this particular tie. Just a very, very poor and insipid Clare performance at times.
That's true. I don't think anyone would deny that. And, you could use the phrase lack of bejesus about us as well, because there was no bit of zip at all. And that was from early doors, Derek. Even I think, when Cormac got the goal and he kicked a wonderful 2-pointer after that, you felt that Clare would push on. But yet you weren't convinced because we were as lethargic as we were in the first half. And then I think Offaly sensed it, and they felt, playing against a breeze, even though they were a point or two down, they felt the game was still there from which it proved to be.
And Kieran, that's surprising insofar as the Clare's last outing was a rather positive one, albeit in defeat. And you'd expected them to bounce into this game at home, and we know Offaly have had their troubles this year. 7 losses from 7, albeit in Division 2, and a bit of uproar in the county between clubs fighting with management and one thing and another. It just wasn't something any of us saw coming.
No, it doesn't, and I suppose maybe the favourites tag doesn't sit well with us really. But we came into it in a positive frame of mind. Good performance, as you said, against Kerry. Plenty positives from the game, and all we were hearing about Offaly was they'd played 9 games and they'd lost them all, and you would have expected that we'd hit the ground running and give a good performance and get the victory. But we, from the word go, there was no energy about this team on the day for some particular reason, whatever it was, and just we didn't have any injection of pace at all throughout the game. Maybe 1 or 2 bursts from Ickham and 1 or 2 runs from Manus, but overall it was a very sluggish display, and it reminds you maybe of the Westmeath performance in the league when we really struggled. But we've been putting up good scores all throughout the league. We've been aiming for that 25-point mark, but we never looked like getting anywhere near it. We'd 2 points on the board after 23 or 24 minutes, and a couple of fisted points just before half time, but 4 points in a half of football. While I know there was a bit of a breeze there, but it was really a nice sunny day and conducive to good football, and we never came out of the starting blocks really.
And Joe, we know there was the injuries, and anytime you talk to Paul Madden, in fairness to him, it's always about the next man up. But I suppose when so many next men up have to go up, does it test the depth a little bit? Was it kind of stretching maybe a thin enough resource, or how did you see that?
Well, I still think we had enough players and a panel good enough to take Offaly. So it's every county deals with injuries, so it's part and parcel of the game. But if you remember, Derek, we had the same hangover, for want of a better phrase, last year against Down, having exited the Munster Championship. Down came to town and just went through us, and then the lads picked it up. It was like that's out of the system. Over the years we've had games like that have knocked you out of the competition, whereas this time round I think maybe there wasn't the same the same threat of in the season. We didn't there was kind of a nonchalance to what we had the last day, and I think that's out of the system now. We go forward. We know who the next opponents are. It's at home, and I don't think Paul will have much to say to the players. There'll be nobody as disappointed coming out of Parky Soul last Saturday as the players will be. So I don't think he'll have a whole pile to say in relation to preparation for the next one.
And Kieran, this dynamic of the Tailteann Cup, it was Clare's first time in it, and I suppose the value that maybe a county places on it, is it more so because you've been in that lower tier for a while and you're scraping to get out of it, whereas Clare spent the last 3 years traversing the country, going to places like Oman, playing those kind of a team, whereas now it was a bit of a reset and a bit of a mental challenge as much as anything?
Yeah, it was a new challenge for us, and look, we are where we are because of how we've done in the league, and we had done very well the last few years getting to Munster finals. So that wasn't the case this year. There is a carrot there that if you can go and win this competition, you get back into Sam Maguire football next year. And look, we would, on paper, before a ball was kicked in this, we would have been in the top 3 or 4 bookies' favourites to have a good run in this competition. And I think we're still capable of resetting and coming again, but I think we have to show now the next game how much we want it. Because, I'm not saying that it wasn't from lack of effort. It was probably a very, very sluggish display. But we have to come into the next game showing how much we wanted, because there was a few things that I would have been disappointed with. Like when Mark McInerney kicked his 2-pointer with a few minutes to go in the game, the next kick out was won by the Offaly number 4 Lee Pearson, one of the smallest players on the field. And I was disappointed with that when we looked like we might have had a little bit of momentum to kick on and finish strong. It just wasn't there, whether it was tiredness or something like that. And we definitely had 3 or 4 players go down with cramp in the last few minutes of the game, which was a little bit surprising, So maybe there is a little bit of tiredness after a tough campaign in Division 3 and a big game against Kerry as well. But we've 2 weeks now to reset and get ready to face Longford and show that we want to have a good run in this competition, because we're in knockout football now, another defeat and the season is over, and we certainly don't want that. When we find ourselves in this competition, we want to give a good account of ourselves and maybe get to Croke Park if we can. And
Joe, it felt like in the third quarter that Clare expended quite a bit of energy in getting themselves back into the game. Do you think ultimately they just bottomed out a small bit?
Well, we should have had plenty of it, Derek, because we didn't use a whole pile of it the first half. So, maybe we condensed a lot of it into third quarter, and you have to hand it to the players. They knuckled down. They began, quite a bit in arrears at half time and came back in Cormack's goal. We got kicked, as I say, a lovely 2-pointer after that. We slowly but surely we began to impose ourselves and put ourselves in a winning position. But, I don't know, was it tiredness or flatness? I don't think the crowd ever got into the game. We didn't give them any opportunity to get into the game. And, in fairness to Paul, he didn't mince his words after it. He'll be disappointed. But as I say, that's done and dusted. It's an extra game. Now you're into knockout, and at this time of the year, this time of the season, you want to be in. You want to have that knockout trust to whatever games you're playing. It's there now. We have Longford. It's not a bad draw. Longford will fancy their chances as well. They would have fancied a run at this at the Tailteann Cup, but they have to come to Innis, and we need to get back to being in it somewhere you don't want to go to. Westmeath have come. Offaly have come. Wexford have come. Kerry came, 4 games already that we've lost in Páirc Uí Chaoimh this year, so it's time to arrest that stat.
Yeah, Kieran, that's quite a worrying one because Innis nearly had the trademark of the tough place to go, and even in a hurling context, like it has been anything but that in the last couple of years, and obviously as Joe outlined there from a football sense, that same way. So like when Paul Madden's approaching this game now, do you nearly forget about calling it a Tailteann Cup Round 2B game? Do you look at your own metrics, your own standards, their tackle counts, their turnover counts, all that kind of stuff, worry about hitting all those and then hope that the cumulative at the end of the 74 or 5 minutes is enough to have you over the line?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a full reset. You're going to have to look at all those stats and see where you can improve, because to be totally honest with you, there was very few frees in this game, and that'll show you kind of the ferocity of the tackles that were going in. I think Offaly might have scored 1 free through Dylan Hyland, but there was very little over the course of the 70 minutes. And, there were, even say Dylan Hyland's first 2-pointer, if you get a chance to see it back, he kicked it with no pressure, no one within 5 or 6 yards of him. And that's something that while, we might have said a year or two ago, that's something we hadn't been seeing this year. There was an awful lot more pressure being put on the kickers, and it just wasn't there, whether it was the energy levels or whatever it was. There will be a full reset. They'll investigate this. And the one thing that we have noticed with the management throughout the year is when we've had problems throughout the team, they have identified that and done their best to correct them. And we'd been saying about how much we had been conceding, and we certainly improved that area, and especially in the Kerry game. I just think maybe myself, our setup, it was pretty much the same as it was for the Kerry game. And obviously losing Killian Ryan, you lost a massive attacking threat. But I thought maybe our half forward line was probably a little bit defensive. But in saying that, as Joe said there a while ago, there wasn't really a huge amount of options on the bench either. In an attacking sense, we're down an awful lot of attacking players at the moment, and hopefully we can get a few of them back. But any team in the country would miss players like Owen Cleary and Dermot Coughlin and Dara Bohannon, and hopefully Emmett McMahon maybe getting closer to fitness, although I would imagine the next game might come a little bit too soon for him. But we definitely need to get 1 or 2 more attacking players back on the field, because that creativity wasn't there to make the chances for the likes of Aaron Griffin and Cormac Murray and Mark McInerney.
Joe, you've been in inter-county dressing rooms with the bonnet door bib on you. What's going to be the most pertinent message perhaps that Paul Madden and his crew will try to be sending to players over the next week or two?
Well, there will probably be a bit of a system reset, I'd imagine, Derek, in that our game the last day was a bit predictable in terms of, players coming the peel, kicking the ball from distance, for a 2-pointer. We don't put in a lot of ball, fast ball into the full forward line. And I'm sure that at times those options were available the last day and weren't exploited. So the management will look at that first and foremost before they go and approach the players and see, because it's a collective, it's not simply a player's problem to solve. The management have to step up their game as well. So I think you'll see that there won't be any blame apportioned. Everybody will demand standards of each other. And I'm sure Paul knows that more than anybody. He'll say, we've let these standards drip the last day. But as I keep saying, and Kieran alluded to it there, when it has happened in the past, we've got to bounce back. So I think the next day, and it's also, I think, from a spectator point of view, we need to get a few more bodies through the styles as well, because the lads, give everything every day out for the Clare jersey. Even in commentaries, when games are going against us, you still feel these boys will go to the bitter end. And the last day, we lacked that bit of intensity. And I think the next day it'll be about everybody involved, management, players, everybody involved, upping the ante quite considerably.
Kieran, how big a dynamic is it now that the safety blanket is gone? From here on out, from a Clare perspective, every game is knockout. Does that change the mindset a little bit?
Yeah, I think it does. You knew the last day, regardless, when things were going away from you, you still had another game to come, be it in the winner section or the loser section. That's gone now. It's old style knockout football now, and if we're behind in the game against Longford and Cusack Park, we know that we have to put our bodies on the line, or our season is over. And I think that will be really refocus everybody. You can't beat knockout football. It's like the club championship. When the club championship gets to the quarter-final stage, that's when really things kick on, and that's a totally different type of game when there's no safety net there. So I do expect that we'll see more of what we have come accustomed to seeing under Paul Madden this year. And while we've had one or two blips along the way, we have played good football. We have to park this result. There's nothing else you can do. It was a very poor performance. We can't dress it up any other way. But I'm sure that they will watch the videos back and find out what the reasons were for it, and do their best to address them, and hopefully we get one or two players back and we'll be in a lot stronger position when we get to face Longford.
Yeah, that game on just under 2 weeks' time, likely to be on the Saturday, I would say, because I think on the Sunday the hurlers go to Páirc Uí Chaoimh, so I doubt they could, maybe they will, who knows, but I doubt that they'll go clashing if they can avoid it at all. Joe, just talking about knockout football, we're going to hear very shortly from Clare manager Joe Hayes ahead of a huge evening for them down in Austin Stack Park in Tralee. Maybe a free shot in a lot of ways. Brilliant to win that Darrell Darcy the last day out, and they can go to Austin Stack Park now and have a right cut.
Yeah, well, Derek, I'm not overly keen on this free shot. I think this is a championship semi-final, and they're there on merit. They're proved to be the best of the other four, we'll say. And that Darrell Darcy triumph should, instill that extra bit of confidence. It was great to see, scoring 2 goals as well. So well done to young Dylan there from Dunbeg. Just great to see him, because he's getting a penchant for goals now at the moment in that Clare jersey, which is a very welcome development, as Clare progresses. So I think it's Munster semi-final. Our 20s were in the same boat going down. We know how difficult a task it'll be, but it's still a Munster semi-final. There's a huge prize on offer, and you can throw the hammer, the hatchet, and the 2 handles now at Kerry, because as Kieran said there a few moments ago, knockout football should bring out the best in players.
Yeah, and Kieran, this is a group that have, evolved as the season has gone on. They've seen every peak and trough there could be, from, that night against Waterford and Quilty to the game against Cork, to the highs that they would have seen in Lemmy Bryan and everything in between. So in terms of the development of their journey anyway, they have certainly got plenty.
Yeah, they have. Look, they've improved so much from that first out in Quilty against Waterford, and seeing them take revenge on them and win the Darrell Darcy was huge. So yeah. And I know what you're saying, Joe, about the free shot. Look, you're going down facing Kerry. That's a tough task anyway. But it's a Kerry team that's on the back of a fairly big beating from Cork themselves. So they've got plenty to prove as well. But I've been impressed with this team. And Thomas Dillon, you mentioned him. I think he's a player that has really impressed, because he wasn't a starting player when this campaign kicked off, and he got on in 1 or 2 games and really impressed. And now he's one of our main players, and he was excellent the last day. And look, Shane Cahill gave a real captain's performance as well the last day. I thought he was excellent, and our goalkeeper Conor Griffin has been excellent throughout the campaign. So there's been great improvements, and great credit due to Joe Hayes and the management. They've really grown this team, and the work rate I really like about them. They're very, very impressive. And while Liam Keane was our main scoring threat as we started off the campaign, the scores have been spread around plenty other players now as the campaign has gone on, and that's a sign of a good team, that you're not relying on one player to get the majority of your scores. So look, hopefully they'll go down and take their shot at Kerry and have a good rattle at them, and you never know where that might take you. Yeah,
7 o'clock start in Austin Stack Park for that one, so we won't feel that coming. We'll hear from Joe Hayes in just a moment. But lads, thanks a million for having a chat with us this evening.
No bother. Thanks, Eric.
More to come. Do stay tuned. Now, welcome back to Clare FM's Sideline View review. Well, as we mentioned before the break, Clare face Kerry this evening in the Munster Minor Championship in what is effectively a semi-final tie. Clare boss Joe Hayes has been telling me that he feels his side have grown on every step they've taken so far this season.
Huge learnings, Derek. Huge learnings for the group. Huge learnings for the management. We don't know it all, so we're learning now as well. And huge character shown by the group on not one or two occasions, but 3 or 4 occasions. To recover from that opening day defeat, where we asked a lot of questions of each other. It was I wouldn't say it was an intense first session back after Waterford, but there was a lot of questions asked, and not finger pointing. We don't finger point, but just talked about our standards in terms of our work rate and stuff like that. We didn't feel it was good enough. Again, you have to put a lot of it down to nerves. They're only 15, 16, 17 years of age, and then to come back, beat Limerick. Element of luck at the end when Charlie McCarthy's free just tailed wide. That goes over the bar. We're gone, Derek. We're done. And then to beat Tipperary again, to be in control of the game, to go behind and being out, to go ahead in injury time. Huge character there. Got a fair lesson against Cork, an unmerciful lesson, and that I'd hope that none of them players have to experience again in their Clare careers. And within 7 days then had recovered again to go down to Waterford, and I do feel we were comprehensive on the night. I do feel we were deserving 6-point winners, if not even a small bit more. I do feel we left a bit behind us in the first half and we were comfortable.
Like, just when you listen through it there, and it was one thing going through the results, and it stuck out really that this team, every time that they've been asked to respond, they're doing so.
They are, and they have a bit of resolve built up, and they're good lads. They know their limitations. There's no individuals or prima donnas in the group. They work very hard for each other. They're tight. I've seen that usually over the last number of months. What starts when you maybe sit down beside your clubmate for the grub after, as you see it develop there, just sitting down with each other and friendships developing. So listen, they're a tight out bunch, and they're young as well. Like I've nine under 16s on this group out of the 34. 6 of them got on the field last Monday night. And throwing Era, who's got game time as well. That's 7 of them that have been exposed to game time throughout the campaign. So listen, they're good lads. They're young, and they're learning all the time. And
that's probably why that, regardless of how things go, and it has been the extra games that it's the real success story, isn't it?
Yeah, it has. You can't beat games. We tonight's the 6th. No matter what happens, we're guaranteed a 7th. So it's great. It's great development from Derek. Listen, I suppose the biggest thing for me, and I suppose the one disappointment I probably will have by the end of it, is I can't, or it's probably very difficult to get game time for everyone. We've 34. We've 29, I think, exposed to being a match day panel, and it is tough on the other 5. But I suppose it was explained at the start that this might happen as the games get competitive. They've got game time in the Leinster League, all right, but as the competition starts, it is difficult to keep everyone happy, but that's part of intercounty football, and that's part of intercounty management. So I suppose there's nothing we can do about that.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's probably all part of the learnings as well, and how you kind of mould that into maybe next year.
Yeah, that's it. I suppose. Listen, I don't know how is the best way to mould it in that. Like, I suppose, do you go with a smaller panel, and which means you don't have as many more to disappoint, or do you just, I suppose, make changes consistently and put it on pure development? It's hard when it comes to under 17 because it is competitive, and it is their first taste of proper competitive football. Do you know what I mean? So they have played their under 14s, under 15s, and under 16 competitions on the way up, and obviously the 9 under 16s will go back and play for the 16s when this is all over. But this is their first taste of proper competitive Munster minor championship, and while it is development, and I appreciate that, you just, when it comes to the competitive action, you just probably have to go with what's strongest available to you on the majority of occasions.
And probably none more so than tonight. And there's a nice correlation, maybe, if you want to call it that, between the 20s and minors, in that here comes the Kerry team beaten by Cork and questions being asked, and they're at home in Tralee. So it's kind of it's stacking the odds again, isn't it?
Yeah, listen, Derek, we're going down to Kerry tonight. I just hope and I expect the boys to go out and perform to the maximum that they are possibly able to perform, and we'll see after that. That's what I expect of them. I think that's what they expect of themselves. There's no point saying it's not going to be ferociously tough. It is going to be ferociously tough, and we'll just see. Listen, we'll see how much we can get right tonight and see where we can go. That's, I suppose, the best we can say about it tonight. We are looking forward to it. This is what we want to be doing, playing the Corks and Kerrys. This is what the lads should be want to do. They should be want to put it on a jersey and testing themselves against the so-called better teams. And we'll see after that.
Clare minor football manager Joe Hayes. 7 o'clock start in Austin Stack Park in Tralee for that game. Now, it's quite simply a massive couple of days of action between Clare and Tipperary, between Munster Championship finals and indeed what feels like an All-Ireland final for some next Saturday. That's for later on in the week. But Sil O'Connor and Tommy Guilfoyle are with us. Look ahead to this year's Munster Under-20 hurling final, lads. It's Clare versus Tip again. And Tommy, before we go forwards, we might go backwards. I think a lot of people will tell us we're backwards anyway. But coming up the road from Cork on last Wednesday night, the company you were in now aside, how different a journey was it from the week before?
Look, there was no comparison. I suppose it was that performance was coming on the back of a poor week for Clare. Minors were beaten, our seniors were beaten, but that display and performance. The soul, because it had everything that you would want in a Clare team from start to finish. I know we spoke about the team is improving, from round to round, but I just thought it was an exceptional performance. I won't say a complete performance because there's always room to work on, but very proud to be a Clare man down in Cork last week. But we know what's ahead of us Wednesday night. But look, you said we'd look back. Excellent performance by team and management.
Yeah, and still on that, I met one of the players. I won't out him now, but his cousin made communion in Mullock at the weekend, and I was having a chat with him on the altar. It's a very apt place to talk hurling. But there was a real sense that and it ties into something you said last week about as this championship went on, they developed, and he was kind of saying they felt they fell over the line in a couple of games, but that now they had really kind of started to click and understand each other that little bit better.
Yeah, and when I mentioned that to Tom Spahey back along, he made an excellent point, and everybody involved with an under-8 system, let it be minor or under 20, trying to get the players together is always a challenge for every county and for every management at the start of the year. And it's quite clear to see that the more they're with the group, the better they get. And that has improved as they went on with colleges and all that kind of a thing happening. But it is probably one of the outstanding teams. The improvement that I've seen, if you saw the lads the first night, they were really struggling even with their hurling on the opposition. And that's what they were doing the first night. And but as time went on, the fluency was there, the hurling was up, the enjoyment, I think, is the big thing for it. They just seem to enjoy the game a bit more, which you would do if you had preparation in as well. So, as I said, it was excellent the last night, the mood of the players. One thing stood out to me the last night, Derek, I suppose, Ryan Hayes was centre back for the previous 2 or 3 games. Graham Ball was midfield for the previous 2 or 3 games. Now James Hegarty came back and Ronan Keane came back as well. And I suppose the one thing that would have stood out
Go on, yeah, the phone is off. Go on, go start that again.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I suppose the one thing that that stood out to me more than anything else, and sometimes you get a different way of testing a person's character, but Ryan Hayes and Graham Ball started the previous 2 or 3 games, and the last night with James Hegarty coming back and Ron Keane coming back, they were on the bench. But Ryan Hayes started the game then because Jamie Milan was out injured, and Graham Ball came on, I think, when Joe Casey got injured. But again, the test of character, these 2 lads were absolutely outstanding in Páirc Uí Chaoimh the last night. And as I said, they were disappointed, obviously, to be named not on the tee, but when they came on, they left all that behind them. And I think it's the one thing, small thing, but for me it's a big thing because it's a real test of character. It was superb the last night.
Yeah, and Tom, that element of the collective, like we know when we watch this group at minor level that the anchor at 6 was James Hegarty. He wasn't there up to now. James Conlon stepped into that berth. He got injured as well. It felt like that number 6 position was maybe cursed a small bit, but the composure that James Hegarty brings to it, the delivery, his distribution, all that, just how important is it?
Look, I think, Derek, I think more importantly, his know-how into playing that position. I think, settle down, the team, settle down the defence. Now, I know, they've done a good lot of video analysis on probably areas which they wouldn't have been happy with. And, from week to week, that's not easy. But, I think it all came together, last Wednesday night. And Sil is after mentioning, the likes of Ryan Hayes and Graham Ball. Let's not forget as well, Marco Cleary, it didn't work out for him in the earlier games for one reason or another. But, as Sil alluded to, the measure of a man is how he reacts and, has got key scores in the last 2 games. Look at it's evolving the team, but I think it also brings, a confidence within the group that that they know that they can fulfill their potential. And as Terence Fahey alluded to, they were probably just falling over the line. But look that's what games are there for. Round robins, semi-finals were there to be won. And they kept their best performance for the first knockout game of the year, which would have brought pressure in its own right, but they rose to that pressure and really performed excellently under pressure.
And Tommy, if there's one man that can appreciate a big fella in a number 14 jersey, it's yourself. But the emergence of Thomas O'Connor, it's an incredible story, that he probably wasn't around at the start of the season. Next thing, he appears on the squad, appears on the team and becomes just a key figure, so much so that he was man of the match the last night. Just a little word on him, because I think he has been phenomenal.
Yeah, well, as you said, I always have a spot, and I always thought that the team that would bring back the big man, the bear in the square, would have, would get a return from it. But yeah, he has been superb. I think he gives them a different option when the players out the field are on the ball. They know full well that if they, hit the ball in, he'll either win possession, he'll be fouled, or else it'll break. And I think both Rodgers and Cleary benefit from that the last night. But yeah, what a story. In Waterford, played well in a Clare Cup game for his club, Dora Bearfield, and was drafted into the panel. And again, let's give credit to the management. That sometimes managements can be stuck in their ways and are not willing to change. I think Terence Fahey and his management team saw something in him, and I think he has added a real different dynamic to that team. And again, what a story. I don't think he played minors, but if you keep sticking at it, keep improving and get your chance, and more importantly, take it. So for Thomas O'Connor, I'm delighted for him personally, and yeah, the big man on the square hasn't gone away.
No, certainly hasn't, that's for sure. And a lovely picture of himself and his dad, Christy, and all the family after the game as well. So they'll be down the Gaelic grounds on Wednesday night. Still, I suppose one of the big questions, and as we talk here on Monday, we don't know the answer to it yet, but will Oisin O'Donoghue and will Stephen Tobin be at the Gaelic grounds on Wednesday night? Because there's a pretty big game in Thurles a couple of days later. This is a small bit of a conundrum now for Brendan Cummins and Liam Cahill, isn't it?
There's no question about that. If I was a betting man, I think Stephen Tobin will play. I don't think Oisin O'Donoghue will be. I can't see him starting. I'll be quite honest with you. I can't see him starting. Maybe he might be there or thereabouts, maybe for the latter end of the game, seeing how things go. Now, I think I've been optimistic on that from a Tipperary point of view, but there is no doubt about it that Saturday's game, Tipperary will look at that in a very different light, maybe to Wednesday night. But then again, you don't know. As I said, it all depends on how it goes. I think Stephen Tobin will probably play, but I'd be very surprised to see Oisin O'Donoghue lining out.
And Sil, do you think that there's maybe an argument to be made that at this stage Clare are a little bit more road tested than perhaps Tipperary are? Because we've had those couple of games. I know Tip would have had the final round game, but like they were playing an already eliminated Limerick, it was a bit of a walk in the park for a finish. They pulled away quite comfortably in the end, whereas we know the battles Clare have gone through. Now, look, a lot of this is hindsight stuff, and we'll either be massively right or massively wrong come around 9 o'clock on Wednesday evening. But do you think that's a factor, the fact that Clare have had to go to the well, whereas Tip have been off for a week and weren't really tested in their last outing either?
They weren't, but they were well tested at the start of the championship because they only beat Cork by 2 points. They only beat Waterford by 1. We only beat Waterford by 1. And when Limerick were competitive, we only beat them by 3. And when we played Tipperary in Thurles, the biggest smash and grab of the year, what a super finish, one we won't forget. And on that particular night, we only beat Tipperary in the last seconds of the game, and they had only 14 men on the field. So to go back, I wouldn't look too much into Tipperary beating Limerick by 18 points the other night because 2 factors, I suppose. Tipperary were obviously enjoying the game if you're cruising at that rate. Limerick had nothing to play for, really. And so I wouldn't look back battle-hardened. There is no doubt about it. If you go back on any given day, at any given time, if you go down and lose to Cork and come back a week later and a 10-point turnaround in the space of 7 days, that's notable. There's no question about that. Beaten by 4 and then beat Cork the following week by 6. As I said, that's a 10-point turnaround. There's no doubt about it that Clare was superb on that particular evening. I think there's a different test coming up on Wednesday evening. But if we see the forum that we saw in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, it'll be a very, very stern test for Tipperary as well to defeat this Clare side.
Tommy, what's your read on that?
Yeah, look, I think it's always said that it's very hard to beat the same team in the same competition twice. I've heard Terence Fahey, speak about taking the learnings from each game and trying to look for improvements. Look at Tip players and management were devastated to lose to Clare, I think, in Thurles. They'll be smarting, from that, and revenge can be a big motivating factor. But from a Clare point of view, I believe that they've looked at their own performances from game to game. Tipperary came in probably as the favourites maybe to win. They've been successful in the last couple of years. But for me, the question with Oisin O'Donoghue will have a bearing on the game. I just thought, last week from a Cork point of view that, Barry Walsh just looked tired. They're only 20. And again, O'Donoghue, the last day was man of the match below in Waterford, for a team that, probably Jekyll and Hyde in the first half and second half. Now, the big question will be, and again, look, it's a question that comes up every time at this time of the year. Will, the under-20s be allowed play in their own age group? Now, there's 2 massive games coming up for Tip. We're not in that position, but, again, he'll be a key factor. But from a Clare point of view, I think, the hopes are that Jamie Moylan will be available. Unfortunately, it looks like, Joe Casey won't be available. Ronan Keane and James Hegarty, has a full game behind him. So I think, this Clare team are improving. I think there's more improvement in Clare than there is in Tip, based on the players returning. So I think if Clare, as Sil said, if they perform to the levels and bring the level of intensity and physicality and never say die, I think we're in with a great chance in the Gaelic grounds Wednesday night.
And Sil, you mentioned the word, revenge perhaps being a factor, but I remember speaking to Terence actually before the first game of this year's championship, and we began by having a quick word about last year, and while that word didn't go on too long, there was still a sense that maybe they were still thinking about those decisions that did and didn't go their way that night. The black card that should never have been, and a defender having his hurley held while a goal was scored, and all that kind of a thing. So Clare have plenty hurt in the bank as well here.
Oh, there's no question about that. But you know what? When that ball is thrown in on Wednesday night, I don't think anybody will be really thinking about that. They're the kind of things you mentioned in the build-up to a game. You can imagine the pep talk that Tipperary would have. We took our eye off the ball for a few minutes and told us, say, came along, score 2-2 in the last 6 minutes. All that kind of thing. That's all build-up, But when that ball is thrown in, what will you have on the field on that night? You know what I mean? What performances will you have on the field that night? And from watching Clare from day one to the last day below on Park Equive, they are mountains apart. You know what I mean? From the players we saw the first night. That's the improvement we've seen. But let's not get carried away. That's the improvement Tipperary will be having as well. They were definitely probably going the best in the early part of the championship. But as I said, and I keep saying it, the improvement I see in Clare has been very notable. You don't go down every day in any grade, at any level, in any competition. You don't go down to Cork in the space of 1 week and come away with a 10-point turnover. That's the improvement we've seen. And I'm expecting that to be enough on Wednesday night for a fantastic occasion, hopefully with everybody in the county in behind these lads, because they're a superb group of players and great to watch.
Yeah, and it'll be mighty to listen to as well. And we'll be live from the TUS Gaelic grounds with a 7:35 start on Wednesday evening. Lads, thanks very much indeed for that. We are back shortly here on Sideline View Review. Now, delighted to have Jim Madden with us to look back on a busy weekend, primarily focusing on these FAI Junior Cup games, where, Jim, it's fair to say it was a pretty mixed bag from a Clare perspective.
It was indeed, and incredibly I found it disappointing. The only bright spot, and it is one hell of a bright spot, is the performance by Tulla down in Waterford playing Hibernian, because Hibernian are second down there in the league to Villa. They're quite well clear of the other teams behind them. They're a strong side, and they would have expected to advance. Now, Tulla went 1 up, and then the game went 2-1 all, and then it went 2-1 to Tulla. And they were pulled back again, and by God, they had the bottle to win by 3-2, which is a brilliant result for them, and we're delighted to have them there. In Knocknacarra, then, I talked to Mike Rafferty of Galway Bay Radio. He kept me in touch with him. Basically, he felt that Newmarket were a bit disappointing from his point of view. He thought they would have been better. Knocknacarra went in front in the second half, and then Newmarket equalised very quickly, and that was where it stayed, and it went to penalties, and Knocknacarra prevailed in the penalties. I think Newmarket missed 2, if not 3 penalties there. Owen Hayes, unfortunately, went off at half-time, which would have been a big loss to Newmarket there, but they should have been capable, because they have a strong squad, of getting a result up there. And then I was at the Avenue game versus Coachford, and there is no doubt that Coachford really took Avenue apart, scored 5 goals. They led at half time, I think 2, and then they went 3, and then 4 in the second half, and then 5 eventually. Coachford are a team, as one or two of their people spoke to me, said, we are a team that like to be involved in the closing stages of both the FAI and the Munster Junior. They were beaten in the Munster Junior semi-final there some weeks ago by Villa from Waterford, and they're looking for a good cup run in the FAI. And I tell you, they did look fit. They looked very well organised, and they won a lot of ball when it had to be won, maybe the breakdowns and all of that kind of thing. Very disappointing for Avenue. There was a good crowd there. It was an excellent day for football, but a very disappointing result for Avenue there.
Yeah, I guess it's a standout result as well, because in fairness to Avenue, in the last couple of years, Rosslevin had been something of a fortress for them. So for the margin of victory, I think it kind of raised a few eyebrows, did it?
It did indeed, and Coachford were. When I spoke to a couple of the Coachford people, they felt that the game might actually go to extra time, because last year with Avenue, I think it went to penalties in the Munster Junior, was it? One of the cup competitions anyway. I think it was a 1-1 draw, and it went to penalties, and Coachford won it. It was the Munster Junior, because sure, they went on to win that. And they also came up here and beat the Bridge as well in the game. So they are a strong side, but they did expect that they would have a serious competition and that it would go to extra time. I think they were absolutely stunned that they dominated the game so much. And from an Avenue point of view, it was incredibly disappointing. I spoke to some of the Avenue people afterwards. They couldn't believe how badly they performed and the fact that they were outclassed in a sense. Disappointing.
Yeah, and the same perhaps for Newmarket. I think it was a pretty dramatic extra time period. I think there was an own goal thrown in there before Nathan got the equaliser deep in injury time again in extra time, and then, as you say, the penalties just didn't go their way. But for both Newmarket and Avenue, we know they would have been seriously strong contenders for this FEI. They would have really eyed it up, and I suppose both of them now will be particularly turning to the Clare Cup. Newmarket looking for that double, and those semi-finals will be even more tasty.
Oh, they will indeed, because there is no doubt coming after the game there in Rosslevin yesterday. That was what some of the Avenue people were saying. Well, the only thing we have for now is the cup, and we've got to take care of Innisdiamond in the semi-final, and hope that we perform properly and go well in the final. So, because both clubs do like to have a bit of silverware at the end of the season. Now, Newmarket have the Premier League one, but they do love the cup as well.
Certainly do. And just speaking of Innisdiamond, Jim, and just looking at some of the results from the weekend, and a 5-1 victory for Sporting over Bridge B in the second division there. So obviously there's a lot of work going on in preparing them for what is probably their biggest. Is it fair to say it's the biggest fixture of the club's history? One of them?
It would be in my book. I haven't seen them at a semi-final for a long, long time. There is no doubt that they will really be up for the game against Avenue in the semi-final, which will probably be in a week or so. And that would have been a great chance for them to warm up in the sense, but it would also have been a great chance for Sporting to use their squad and to use all of their squad to bring on 5 subs, because that's very important, and that that everybody is raring to go fit and that there's competition for positions. I think that they will prove to be tough opposition in the semi-final.
Yeah, and a good test for Bridge United as well in the Premier Division. We know that's wrapped up with Newmarket being the champions, but a 3-2 victory against Ennisdons, hard fought by all accounts.
Yes, indeed. I was surprised. I thought Bridge would win a bit easier than that. But again, it's great that when it goes right down to the wire, you have competitive games, and like the Bridge will appreciate that they had to work hard to get a result there at Flannan's on Sunday. But 3-2, while it doesn't to make them win anything, it does get them ready, and winning as well gives them a bit of confidence for when they'll come into the Cup semi-final, because they do feel that they threw away a league match in Newmarket there, or was it a league match? Or yeah, it must have been some weeks back. Yes, the bridge will be up for this. I think we will have two cracking semi-finals in the next week or so. I haven't seen the fixture list for next weekend, but there probably will be a break, and then the week after that. Then in the first division, Derek, then we had a couple of games. Connolly played Shannon Olympic. Shannon Olympic won that by 3-2. Olympic are hoping that they might sneak into the playoff situation there, while Shannon Hibbs, who are also in the running for promotion, they won 5-2 at Mount Shannon.
And just looking at the Premier League table, I know it's only semantics really, but like if the Bridge could secure the second spot and be above Avenue in the standings, I know it's only a small thing, but when you look back on the season, I suppose it's a nice thing as well to finish as high as you can. But I think it's fair to say, Jim, there's a little bit of a mess perhaps at the bottom of the table, because Kilrush Rangers are actually sitting on bottom of the standings now after that walkover, and incredibly the Lifford team that ultimately pulled out of the league, they're sitting above them with the 4 points that they garnered. So I'm not quite sure what way all that's going to play out as well, because obviously it has ramifications with the playoff in that first division and all the rest of it. So a little bit of administrative stuff to get sorted out here.
Well, it does, and you're after, because I didn't actually look at the table. I had forgotten that with the walkover, that Kilrush would have forfeited the 3 points plus a 3-point penalty, and of course that does cause problems for them. So they are going to be at the bottom of the table and relegated. And as you said, Lifford have pulled out, so it's hard to know, will there be a playoff at all, or will the 3 teams that finish second, third and fourth in the first division now be automatically promoted? There'll be good fun at some league meeting in the next couple of weeks, won't there?
Yeah, we might get a call into Davy O'Grady and see what they're thinking on that one. But look, that's it for this weekend's action. Jim, we'll have previews to come on Friday as well, and we might be a bit clearer on those Cup semi-final fixtures as well, which are always a huge draw in the county ground. So we'll do that then.
We will indeed, and I'm looking forward to that, and I will talk to you then.
And that is all we have time for this week on Sideline View Review. The West Wind is up next here on Clare FM. Enjoy the rest of your Monday evening.